Hello everybody, welcome to the UK Gwen and Peter Aged Awareness Show. The following quote is an extract from Dwayne Hepner's book, The Real Far Country. Scene 7, The Hiddenness of the All Ears. For weeks on end, Ursula would come to me at my house during the late evenings. Sometimes we would sit in my room while I was outside of the body, as it was positioned on the bed and sleeping. She was teaching me about what Rebazar had shown me. We sat together on a little sofa I had next to the bed. She would use the finger of her right hand to draw designs in the air in front of us, and as she did, she would explain what she was doing. You see how simple the figure for this perception is? I know you can fathom the depths of its meaning, can't you? Yes, I can. I like how the symbols take on their own colours and form. Some of this does look very foreign to me, something like Japanese writing and even their artwork, I said as she drew in the air. I am creating some of the images of what Rebazar has been sharing with you and Paul, because we will be communicating with a lot of different people and aliens from other worlds in this realm in the future. When the future is now, Rebazar wants you and I to go out on our adventure and share what this world will also be needing. There are a lot of sleeping souls who are being prepared at this time for what Paul will present, and it will take a lot of endurance to handle all the multitudes of them. When Paul steps into the rod of power, he will also be taking on the bits of karma of many worlds and realms. He who has the real position must learn to stabilize and adjust a person from their many levels. Of course, this all depends upon the individual themselves and their willingness to be adjusted according to the all ears. Most people have a lot of tap lines in them, and just like a surgeon taking out bullets, these things must be handled gently. Many times they are removed without the person even knowing it has been done on their conscious physical level, she said. I can see what you are saying in the images you are making, I said. Yes, we will be using these images and symbols to communicate with those who still use this form. I find it very artistic in nature. When you have advanced, I will show you how the sounds of the ears are incorporated with some of the imagery, she said. You mean like music? I asked. Yes, and you are going to learn a lot about real music. There were a few great composers on the earth, but I will show you the one who will have the strongest impression upon you, and you will meet him in the future now. Not on the earth, but the real side. Music is very important, as the sounds help to harmonise us as we are in the psych realms. When we are in the real universes we are fine, with all the aliveness we live in, but here we constantly need adjustments, as we are dealing with an assortment of moving changes. Look, as you can see in this design, the mind of man cannot fully comprehend that the dualistic realms cannot be overcome by subversive control and manipulation. These lower forces are like a wild horse, and many times like a great beast that will not be conquered. You will learn how to adjust yourself within the psych realms so that you can handle anything of a dual nature, she said. Can you tell me who the composer is you are talking about? I asked. Yes, it is Richard Wagner. He was here in the 1800s. He wrote some of the most beautiful operas and overtures. Rebazar and the real guides worked with him while he was on Earth. His operas were based upon the ascension of the unaware soul into higher realms and worlds beyond the Earth. He wanted to be accepted in the public, so he disguised his operas in a way to seem like interesting little stories and adventures. He knew the story part was one thing, but it was really the music that he wanted to bring across, like I am showing you these Sanskrit symbols. Because people are so low in their awareness of life, they usually only consider the words that are said and spoken out loud. But it is actually the sound of life that has the hidden meaning and perception of what is truly possible for all of us. I like music, but I never heard Wagner, I said. What you refer to as music is more of a jumbledness of sound, going every which way. Some of what you listen to is okay, but it is very primitive and too emotional. I will teach you a lot about real music, and you will learn to love it, she said, as she hugged me. End of quotation. I have to say I find this incredibly interesting. The wonderful music of Wagner has played a huge part in this life, and I am certain not just this one. There is no doubt that his mighty work, the 15-hour epic Der Ring des Nibelungen, the Ring of the Nibelung, in particular, has already enslaved my being long before it did in my present life on earth. When I rediscovered it as a teenager, for rediscovery is certainly the correct word, what should have been new wasn't. It is no exaggeration to say I found it totally haunting. I knew I'd heard it before, but certainly not in this lifetime. I was brought up on Elvis Presley and Bill Haley. Throughout all Wagner's music dramas, the word opera is simply not adequate to describe these vast symphonies with words. I found small, seemingly insignificant passages, often merely a few notes, that I seemed to know and pointed back to some earlier time. Indeed, I came to think of them as pointers. They seldom occurred in any famous musical passages, but more in the very heart of those mighty scores that I could not possibly have heard by accident or otherwise on the radio or whatever. In any case, the sheer number of them, especially in the Ring, precluded that possibility. I also know in my very being I had not only heard them but seen them before, and had a deja vu experience at one point that seemed to prove this. Wagner therefore played a large part in my voyage of self-discovery over some 60 years or more, that ultimately led me to Dwayne's fascinating books and the New You. The fact that the composer himself was visited by the real guides and obviously granted an insight into the real worlds, including what can only be termed the real music, gives a fascinating answer to a previously unanswered question posed in a book I read years ago, namely, what happened to Wagner between completing Lohengrin and starting to write The Ring? As the question implies, musically there is a huge quantum leap between the two works. Lohengrin was completed in 1848, and although a wonderful work, already full of beautiful and much loved music, by the time Wagner started the score of Das Rheingold, the Rheingold, the first of the 4 Ring dramas in 1853, the music had become totally supercharged, vividly descriptive of the natural world in which the mythological events are set, and often almost unbearably beautiful. The 5-year interval was spent by Wagner writing the words to the 4 dramas, something no other great opera composer has ever done, but it seems now self-evident that it was during that time that the real guides manifested themselves, perhaps also during the long periods of meditation Wagner tells us in his autobiography when he composed the music. Locked away in a silent room draped with pastel colours and exuding beautiful perfumes, as he said, nothing new comes to me at the piano. It is then a simple working out. In fact, he tells us that even while writing the words, he had what he called the musical aroma in his head. He also leaves us a fascinating insight into how the music came to him for the opening of The Ring. He had gone to a spa town to take the waters when one day, sitting on a bench, he suddenly found himself in a waking dream with what was to become the swirling waters of the Rhine at the beginning of Das Rheingold. He came round in terror, thinking he was drowning. He then realised, he said, that the music was not going to come to him from without, but from within. In other words, he was what would probably nowadays be described as channeling the music. Where else could that be from but from the higher realms on the real side? Whereas all his mature works from Der Fliegende Holländer, the Flying Dutchman, onwards exhibit much that is esoteric, even in his only comedy, Die Meistersinger von Nuremberg, the Master Singers of Nuremberg, it is interesting that the prize song comes to Walter von Stolzing, the hero, in a dream. It reaches new heights in his final work, Parsifal. Not only the music, which at times is so suggestive of unseen higher realms, but the story itself could almost be likened to the search to return to whence we came long ago, the source of everything, or the all is, as Dwayne calls it. In my view, the all is could be represented by the Holy Grail. In Wagner's wonderful story, which he drew from Arthurian legends, Parsifal in English, is a young lad who has grown up in the woods after straying from his home with his widowed mother, Herzeleida, heart in sorrow, who subsequently dies of grief at her loss. In Act 1 he appears in the grounds of Monsalvat, a castle where is kept the Holy Grail. Having been made to witness a ceremony which he doesn't understand, he is unceremoniously ejected and sent packing. Arguably this is the beginning of the quest, and can be likened to a new soul leaving the all-is on a voyage of discovery that we all go through. In Act 2 he eventually finds himself confronted by the castle of the Black Magician and former guardian of the Grail, Klingsor. Before he comes face to face with Klingsor, however, he has to battle his way through many of the latter's knights, and then escape the clutches of the seductive flower maidens, and finally the attempted seduction of Kundry, the wild woman, who has already been the downfall of many of the Grail knights, including Amfortas, the present Grail king. All of this could be likened to fighting his way through many lifetimes with all their trials and temptations. After failing in her attempts to seduce Parsifal, Kundry calls on Klingsor, who then appears wielding the Holy Spear. This is the spear that was used by the Roman Longinus to pierce Christ's side when he was on the cross. Like the Grail, it is a treasured holy relic, and was stolen from Amfortas by Klingsor while Amfortas was laying with Kundry. Before making off with it, Klingsor had plunged the spear into Amfortas, leaving him with a wound that can never be healed except by contact with the spear itself. It is Klingsor's ambition to obtain also the Grail and use its power for his own nefarious ends. In my view, Klingsor could be likened to the Callum god, ruler of the third and fourth level of existence, and Kundry in some ways suggests the influence, Callum's seductive cohort. Either way, Klingsor now hurls the spear at Parsifal, who catches it in mid-air and makes the sign of the cross. Instantly Klingsor's castle and the magic gardens, abode of the flower maidens, are reduced to dust. Only Kundry now remains, and she puts a curse on Parsifal, saying he will never find his way back to Monsalvat and the Grail. When Act 3 begins, many years have passed. When Parsifal finally appears once more at Monsalvat, we learn that he has gone through many battles, carefully avoiding using the Holy Spear, which he now carries with him, and only now, as a mature man, found his way back. In other words, after getting past the Callum god, and after many more existences, he has finally rejoined the All-Ears.
I'm reading a little bit about from Dwayne after looking at the birds in the garden eating from our bird feeder, so I thought this was quite appropriate. Birds by Dwayne for President. Have you ever seen a flock of birds in any military action or manoeuvres? What about confronting other flocks of birds in battle? Birds do not destroy their environment, as do military-minded people who have prepared themselves for lethal confrontations of combat. Not many people really wonder about the ploy of what has been cleverly created as a military system controlled by self-appointed governments to defend themselves against others, which has all been a set-up to get unaware people to chase their tails, so to speak, and stay confused. Keeping unaware and vulnerable people confused is a created game to control them. Birds are not confused or fooled by deception, but very aware, and this is why they do not do as people do. Again, use the birds as a great example of not needing to create any defences of a destructive occurrence. It is so that birds and animals do not have their situations they must deal with and each other, as they are on this harsh surface known as Earth, but they do not purposely plan pollution and poisoning of others, nor do they ever consider taking over agendas to dominate others. What would this world be like without the military mind controllers? Would it be better or worse? This is a silly question, and the answer is obvious, except to those who want to control others. Everything here is choice. In this generation, all of us came into this life with what was already here, and so it would seem as though governments with militaries are necessary, but are they really? As long as people keep thinking and agreeing as they have about what has been created here and constantly adding to it, then a huge decline will continue to take place. That will have to be constantly dealt with by those who are not paying attention, and how they are being controlled by others. There is no end to the harsh and struggling lifetimes a person can go through and still accomplish nothing here of a real value. It is time for a real wake-up and real freedom. Breathing by Gwen for President. Prior to the intentional European takeover of what is now the various states of America, the breathable air on this planet Earth was clear of any pollution and poisons. Those who already lived here before any of us came to be, there were real people here, and most of this world who cared about the all-natural environment and how it supported them. From about 300 years ago to now, a gradual controlling takeover has occurred that looks to be a kind of natural possession to things, but not so. Because the takeover of people's vulnerable emotions and minds, and especially their unconscious connections to themselves, has been so gradual, it has also become vastly overlooked. Before there were any official authoritarian ruling systems, each person was dependent upon themselves and the all-natural environment to survive with. Today there has become a huge dependency on artificial means, and especially technology, that seems to do a chasing of thrills to have a continual personal satisfaction that seems to go on, and even into future lifetimes. From all that has taken place to now, the breathable air has become over-toxic from what has been created that does not align itself with the all-natural environment is. Every day each of us is making choices, and what is decided now will continue to affect what will be appearing as every moment is met. Because the personal mind of a person can see through the air they breathe, for the most part, the existing breathable air seems okay. There is so much going on right now on this planet Earth, and a lot of what has been created and is being created is to distract people into agreeing with being controlled for their unaware future. It does make sense to wake up and learn to see what is exactly taking place here. Being self-sufficient by Gwen for President. Looking over what makes sense with the all-natural environment is to where each person is self-sufficient and self-sustaining with what has always naturally occurred here. Since those times when people could figure out their lives with what has always been on this planet Earth, a series of created distortions has come about to where everything is what it is today, polluted and poisoned. Looking over the process of getting from there to here, and it is more than obvious that there are those who have purposely interfered and implemented a controlling factor to just about everything the vulnerable and unaware public has to deal with. So from being self-sufficient and self-sustaining to survive it has come to the point where almost everyone is dependent upon artificial means to survive, and also agreed to let the certain few decide their life and fate. Does this really make sense? Is there no other way to live and be, beside having to constantly deal with the worst controlled environment every day? There was a time when there were no business world, and the all-natural environment was fine, and always getting better. And so what is the real value of the business world and being controlled by others who do not care about the all-natural environment, compared to being self-sufficient and self-sustaining? Each person has the right to decide their life and how they want to live here without interference from others. There is always a way to accomplish a better understanding when each person is willing. Thank you for listening to this recording. Thank you from Peter and Gwen. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will hopefully see everybody next time.
No, you.